Hi everybody, and welcome to my podcast, PepTalks. I am your host, Kat Frisbee, aka Pepper, and this is a yoga episode. In these episodes, we will talk about all things yoga, everything yoga, and that's a lot. So no matter your age, your gender, your weight, your mindset, religious, non-religious, whatever it is, I'll bet that you can find some topics in these episodes that will help you on your journey. Here we go. Hello everyone, and welcome to Pep Talks Yoga. Whether you are listening to this podcast or watching it, I am very grateful that you're here with me today, as this is the very first yoga episode. And today I'm going to debunk myths, or in other words, untruths, about what keep people off the mat, as we say in yoga. First, I'll give you my credentials. I am a 500-hour certified, insured, registered with Yoga Alliance yoga instructor. I am currently a private instructor, both in person and online, and very soon you will be able to go to my website and subscribe to a plethora of videos, educational, form, short, long, what have you, it will be there. I have been in practice since 2009. It is currently 2024, and I have seen quite a bit. So, without further ado, I'm sure that you're going to hear more about my history and background over the next many podcasts. So let's jump right into these myths. I'm first going to list out everything that I have here. So if you have ever thought of these things, questioned these things, or curious, or felt these things, maybe you know somebody that has or have even heard of it, then stick around to after my listing here so that I can express the answers to every single one of these myths. 1, you have to be flexible and or have the desire to be flexible. 2, you are too old or you are too young. 3, you are not a woman. 4, yoga is movement. 5, your injury, surgery, or otherwise birth defect keeps you from doing yoga. 6, you are too restless. 7, you can't meditate. 8, you don't want to. 9, you don't have the right tools, or clothes for that matter. You don't have the time. Yoga is a religion. Yoga is dangerous. Yoga is too easy. I started researching some more because I became fascinated with all of these myths. Here are some more. Yoga causes body and health problems. Yoga can't fix health problems. All yoga is the same. Yoga is expensive. Asana is ancient, so why do it? Yoga is just stretching, and I don't need that. Yoga is not exercise. Yoga is boring. All yoga teachers have the same training. Doing more advanced poses means you're better at it. I don't have enough room at home to do yoga and have to pay to go to a studio. Yoga can be taught by anybody. Yoga is only about your physical ability. That's the list that I have. If you have any more, please reach out and let me know. I'm happy to debunk these myths. So let's go through each one of these and actually think about it. If any of those spoke to you, if you'd ever heard of it, please hang around and listen to this. So you have to be flexible and or have the desire to be flexible. You don't have to have the desire. You don't have to be flexible. In fact, yoga is so large in what it can do that You can hardly have any movement at all if you want to. There's meditative yoga. There's yin yoga, which is a little bit easier for those who are not as flexible or don't want to be flexible. That's closer to the ground. There are all forms of yoga. And one of the things that we have to remember is that in Western view of yoga, it's often misunderstood that, and we'll get to this more in a minute, that yoga is the asanas and the movement. Well, keep in mind that when you think about yoga, you think about the mind and the body. So there's the whole mind aspect around things too. That's the other half of it, in fact. And when you can get these two things, the mind and the body, to coordinate together, it's pretty magical what you can figure out your body actually can do if you want to. One of my favorite quotes from Henry Ford is, "If you believe you can, or if you believe you can't, you're right." Let's move on to the next one. You are too old or you are too young. My clients tend to be over 75 years old. At least that's the current state. Hasn't been in the past, won't be in the future, but currently they're over 75. And I have gotten men and women over that age in so many positions you would not even believe. Of course, you start small, you start reasonably, you start where you are at in life. Yoga should never be painful. There's no wrong way to do yoga unless it hurts. There are a lot of better ways to do it, and that's where you get into form and breathing and so on. But you have your own personal journey. Even if you're very young, I started my son doing yoga at probably five or six. And he was just having fun being upside down. He was having fun moving, and we made it playful. We brought out the little monkey self in him. It does not matter what age you are. What matters is your belief in yourself. What matters is your desire to do yoga. And we'll get into that in another video, because there are a lot of reasons why absolutely anybody could have the reason to get into yoga. So, age, not a factor. Yoga is movement. I touched base on this briefly just a second ago. This is Western thinking. So, asana is actually directly translated to sit, not a movement. And asanas are a series of movements that we can do to create a physical yoga practice. Again, yoga is the mind and the body. So it's not just movement. In fact, staying static in a lot of these positions can benefit you in ways you wouldn't even believe. And that will also be covered in another podcast. Yoga is not just movement. It goes far beyond the mat. You can take yoga with you throughout your entire life and daily anythings. Your injury, surgery, or otherwise birth defect keeps you from doing yoga. I have a book called 2100 Asanas, and I promise you that's not all. All of these asanas range from beginner, intermediate, advanced, and then you can keep flying high from there. There are so many ways to move. Most of my clients have injuries or surgeries. As I said, the majority of them are in an older age group. So they have hip replacements, they have shoulder replacements, they have bicep tears, they have minimal cartilage, they have arthritis, they have back and spine injuries that are horrible. I mean, yoga can address all these injuries. It can work around all of these injuries if you prefer to do that, although I would rather, in my practice, help you through it and figure out how yoga can work for you, because we're looking for range of motion, we're looking for ease of pain, we're looking for eventually symmetry. For instance, if one shoulder's off, let's figure out how to get them balanced with strength and nourishment and stretching. So no matter what your injury, surgery, or otherwise birth defect is, yoga has a way around it or through it. You're too restless. I am so restless. I mean, It is still, I told you I started in 2009, and it is still to this day hard for me to meditate and hard for me to do Shavasana, which is where you just lie down and breathe. Because my mind is racing all the time. And it can be very fun to do yoga with a restless behavior or a restless demeanor, because it gets your body moving and flowing and it gets everything connected together. And accidentally, much of the time, your breath is going to catch you. You're going to slow down in your mind. And you will find peace there whether or not you're looking for it. And it doesn't suck, let me tell you that. A lot of people who feel like they have high energy and are restless, they feel like yoga is slow and it is just so painful to just be so slow. But yeah, slow is fast in yoga. And it'll bring that breath of fresh air, quite literally, through your conscious mind and find clarity so that in that restless behavior, you have some clarity to move along with. It's pretty awesome. You can't meditate. All right, so same topic pretty much. I blended them together, I guess. You can't meditate. When I started meditating, I didn't have any directive. I didn't have anybody to help me. I had no idea how to do it. I didn't know how I was supposed to do it. And so to start with, I would sit there and close my eyes and think about everything that was clouding my mind bit by bit. And depending on how much time I had, I would go through each bit that was clouding my mind negatively, individually, and think about it until I was done being upset about it. That takes a lot of effort. That was kind of a bizarre entryway of doing it, but I didn't know how to do it. And that's fine. Meditation has a lot of aspects to it, and eventually I will give you guys a podcast that's interviewing a meditation instructor that's absolutely phenomenal. I love her to death. And you'll understand a little bit more about being able to meditate and how you can start and where it applies, and in fact, how you can incorporate it in your daily life, whether it's a 1-minute practice or an hour-long practice. So you can't meditate. Well, really, if you think about it, we do meditate. When we're pondering things, or when we allow our mind to breathe or find that space and clarity or find our breath, all of that are aspects, all of those things are aspects of meditation. You don't have the right tools or clothes for that matter. Well, depending on where you are, none of that matters. But every movement has a beginner position without tools. You can do things without tools. And by tools, I mean blocks or straps or even a yoga mat. You don't need these things. You need as much space as your body might take up lying down, and that's it. That's it. And yourself. Just bring yourself. I didn't start off with yoga clothes at all. I had like shorts, I had sports bras, and so that's what I did yoga in. I mean, this morning I did yoga in my bathrobe because I was cold and it was so soft and comfy. So you don't have to have the tools. In my videos, when you're able to access them on my website, you're going to see ways of not using tools and being able to still support yourself through your yoga practice. You can eventually get these things, and on a separate example of this is that you can use all the things around you if you have things around you. Tables, chairs, stools, walls, door frames. It really doesn't matter how much room you have or what you have, you can still do yoga. And remember, yoga is not just the series of asanas that you may have in your mind. You don't have the time. Let me tell you something. I, for a solid year, decided that I would do yoga every single day of that year. I did it. I really actually did it. That was also the first year I had ever had strep throat, and I still did yoga every day. But hear this out. It didn't matter how much time I had or what I was feeling. It was either 5 minutes or maybe it was an hour and a half. It just depended on when I could squeeze it in, because I knew that I would feel so much better afterwards. even if it was just sitting and breathing and connecting my mind to my body. All of it helped. You do have the time. You don't even have to make the time. I had an alarm set at 11:11 for a little while when I was working at one of my very last desk jobs. And I only had it on so that I could remind myself that at least for a minute, just breathe for a second. And of course, that's happening for you throughout the day and you might not even notice it. But that intentional 1 minute felt really good. You do have the time. Yoga is a religion. So people confuse spirituality with religion. This can be a tough one because in Eastern philosophy and where yoga kind of derived, there are gods and entities, deities, whatever you want to call them, that kind of drove the initial meditation that eventually led into asanas and asana practice and so on. Now, yoga is not subscribed to that belief structure. It does not need that to exist and service you. It doesn't need a book. It doesn't need a script. It doesn't need those things. Yoga is spiritual. Yoga is, here you are, here's your spirit, now what? And it guides you into connecting that mind and body that you have, inarguably. So, thinking that yoga is a religion almost ties it down to the point where it really can't help you. But it's an untruth. This is a myth. Yoga is not a religion. It is spiritual. We'll touch base on that a little bit more when we talk about what existential means when it comes to all of the reasons why people come to yoga. So, yoga is dangerous. Yeah, it can be if you are putting yourself in precarious situations. So this is a non-truth because it's something that somebody is subscribing to themselves, saying that they're in a dangerous situation. So yoga is not dangerous if you take the right steps to make sure that you are in a safe environment. And if you're doing something that's more advanced, maybe being spotted by an instructor or really taking your time to see if you're there and breathe through it and use tools if you have those available or use whatever it is that you have around you. Yoga is too easy. It's funny because I read that one online and it was hard for me to relate to because I have been in so many different practices of yoga and around so many different age groups and people and skill levels that I can attest for sure that most anybody could struggle with at least one position in all of these beautiful asanas that we've developed over time. Yoga is not an exercise. Okay, so yoga can be very fluid. It can be very soft. It can be very slow. It can be very loving. You can breathe through it. You can relax the muscles. You can do things that are low to the ground, don't involve a lot of strength or impact. Or most any position, you can contract your muscles and ensure that you're in the right position, make sure that your structure is correct, and hold the position. Our spine and our entire anatomy, the anatomy of the bones, is remarkable when we get it into the right position. And over time, our body has worn away at those bones and cartilage. So we're shifted and not exactly symmetrical anymore. If you try to put yourself completely, perfectly symmetrical in almost any position correctly and hold it and breathe, you might think differently about yoga not being exercise. Yoga can be exercise if you choose for it to be. Yoga causes body and health problems. So there again is no wrong way to do yoga unless it's painful. If it is painful to you, if there is something that, and I'm not saying a deep stretch, I'm not saying maybe a little bit sore, I'm not saying difficult to do. What I am saying is pain. And most anybody listening to or watching this podcast knows what I mean by pain. If you are feeling pain anywhere in the body, stop doing it. Please. Yoga can't fix health problems. It probably can't fix all health problems. I don't know the answer to that, but what I do know is that it can fix some health problems that I have seen. Pain, symmetry. So again, that means, for instance, one shoulder is incredibly off because of an injury or a tear or something. Breathing issues. This can help certain breathing issues. In fact, it's remarkable how much yoga teaches you about breathing, whether or not you intended for that to happen. There are a lot of health issues that can be at least minimized, if not resolved, by doing yoga. And keep in mind, yoga is not just those movements, those asanas, or that series of asanas. All yoga is the same. I think that we've basically covered that through all of the others. However, I'll just go ahead and say there are different titles to different types of yoga. You can adjust yoga to any of your needs. Again, it's not just the body, it is also the mind. And we'll get into teachers in just a minute. Yoga is expensive. You don't need anything but your beautiful self to do yoga. Nothing but yourself. If you have enough room to lie down somewhere, that's all the space you need. I'm 5'5". I need a space that is as long as 5'5" if I want to do a huge practice. But I also don't need that room. I could sit here and do yoga. I could do chair yoga, which is something that I do with my Silver Sneakers yoga clients. So there are a lot of ways to do yoga without anything at all. You could sit in the middle of the forest with no moving room whatsoever and you can do yoga, whether it is asanas or not. So you don't have to go to classes. You don't have to buy all the blocks and straps and wheels and certain kinds of mats and hair ties and outfits or whatever. You don't need any of it. In fact, I would recommend that maybe you start without any of it and see where that leads you so that you can be a little bit more connected to your mind and body and a little bit less focused on what all the other things are doing. Asana is ancient. Okay. I went to a very thorough school. And for a very long time in my practice and my teaching, I felt incredibly uncomfortable with telling people that yoga was 5,000 years old and that all of our positions were 5,000 years old. It's because it's not true. And, I didn't have any basis for many years there to confirm whether or not that was true until I did some additional schooling and we went a little bit more in depth about the history of yoga. So asana again translates to sit, a sit. So here's an asana. Here's an asana, which you might see a bunch of people doing in India. And what I did there for those of you listening was I raised my hand. The other one was I just sat there. So yes, the sitting aspect, sure. That is very, very old. In fact, I'm sure people have been doing it probably our entire existence, if you really want to push it that far. But when I read this online, what the context really is saying that all of these sun salutations and these big flows are all 5,000 years old. That is untrue. In fact, all of these flows, such as Sun Salutation A, started when the YMCA was already started. So think about Chaturanga Dandasana. So that's four-limb stick pose. And that was created from a guy looking at a guy doing burpees. I mean, these things are still in development. These movements are still in development. Like I said to you earlier, there's a book called 2100 Asanas, and it's beautiful. And guess what? There are not only 2100 asanas. I bet that somebody figured out a new one today. We're learning as we go along. So, although yoga in its essence is pretty old, and if you want to call it ancient, sure, 5,000 years is a long time. That doesn't mean that our motions are stagnant and based on old things only. We're constantly evolving and making these more correct and true to the needs of our body and our mind. We're fortunate that the mentality and the meditation aspect of yoga is so old, because it's based in some very beautiful things, and these practices being practiced over and over for such a long time only become more in depth and beautiful, and people understand it more and more and can explain things better. Yoga is just stretching. So just like the exercise comment, you can choose how yoga works for your body. There is no wrong way to do yoga unless it is painful. So yes, you can use yoga for stretching. I definitely do. I would love to finally be able to do the splits. So in fact, I've been currently every single night while I'm watching TV with the boys, stretching my legs with yoga poses and holding them. You can absolutely use yoga for stretching and enhancing your stretching, but it doesn't have to be that. And the other comment here was, I don't need stretching. Our bodies need that opening. They need the movement. They need the fluidity. They need the attention. They cannot be stagnant. If they are stagnant and you do not stretch yourself, you are going to have problems as you age, because you will have a lack of range of motion and a lack of free will with your body. Your body just won't be able to do certain things over time. Our muscles, they have a lifespan, and we can increase that lifespan by stretching. And if you are some kind of awesome gymnast, well, you're already doing it. So in a sense, you are already incorporating the stretching of yoga. You just might be doing it in a different way. And you might want to look into these yoga asanas and how you can stretch that way, because you might find out something new about your structure or your form. Yoga is boring. Oh, I cannot wait to touch this topic in the next podcast. People come to yoga for many different reasons, and the people that don't want to do yoga, you have not figured out what your reason is, and I promise you, you have one. Yoga might be boring to you because you're not in the right class. You're not in the place that inspires you. You're not in the place that's teaching you what you need. And there's no wrongdoing by whatever teacher or environment that was. It just wasn't for you. Yoga can be very exciting, and we'll talk about that more in the next podcast. But yoga being boring, you haven't found the right one for you. All yoga teachers have the same training. So untrue. I'm sure that you have heard yoga teachers say that the sun salutations are 5,000 years old, and maybe today was the very first day that you learned that they're not. I'm very confident in telling you that, because I went to a seriously extensive schooling. I went to a seriously extensive schooling about how to do Zoom yoga, so I can tell from maybe even the most crummy position and lighting that your right hand is off because your left heel is slightly lifted to the right. I can see those things because I've had that training. Other people may not have had that training. I'm sure a lot of people have that went to the same school that I did, or maybe from similar instructors that taught them. But also, my history spans back to where it began was actually in Taekwondo. I started learning about solar plexus and chakras and energy from Taekwondo when I was like 11 years old. And I didn't even realize it. But it sunk in my mind, and I can visually even see my old instructor and how he mapped out the energy fields in our body. I still remember it. There are all these little nuances that happen in one's life that go far beyond the very different schools that there are, that develop the learning and the understanding and the knowledge that a teacher can relay to you. I had gurus that have morphed my thinking in meditation. One of my favorite quotes from one of my gurus actually was, I was very, very upset coming back home from work one day, and I was really thinking about quitting. I was so mad at my boss. I just could not believe how I was being spoken to. I was demeaned. I was put down. I was just all these things. And so I spoke with who I considered to be my guru, one of two, and I just let it all out. I was so upset. And here's what he said to me, and here's all he said to me. He said, these things aren't happening to you. They are just happening. So what are you going to do? Little things throughout everyone's life morph them into the teachers they become. And the last thing that I'll have to say on this topic is that my school is registered with Yoga Alliance. Now, this is no judgment on any school that is not registered with Yoga Alliance. I'm sure that there are a bunch of hoops that you have to jump through in order to do that. However, it is a trend that Yoga Alliance approves these schools because they are deeply rooted in fact and knowledge and skill and talent and excellent relay of information and testing. So I would consider looking into people who are Yoga Alliance registered. It can make a big difference. Again, other people who are not, it does not mean that they are not up to the same par. It does not mean that they don't have the same information. So it's just a little bit of factual information. Yoga is only about your physical ability. We've touched base on this a few times. It is not about your ability. Everybody starts somewhere. No one is exactly down to the core, exactly the same. We all have gone through different things in our lives. There's this great book called Adaptation to Life by Georgie Valiant, and he discusses how identical twins can grow up and be completely different people. So everybody is different. Everyone is different. In their own little way, everyone has something different about them. So your ability is going to be slightly different than your neighbor's. And it's not about showing off. It's about you connecting your mind and your body however you need. And I highly recommend that if you don't know where to start, find an instructor like myself and start asking questions. Google can't always be the best resource because you don't know the background of those people all the time. Really reach out to somebody, person to person. Doing more advanced poses means you're better at it. Totally not true. I know people that can do handstands so much better than I'll compare to myself just because they can do handstands really well and I can't. Does not mean that they are more advanced in yoga than me. Just because somebody can do crow and stick both of their legs out does not mean that they are better than you. Better than, and that comparison to begin with is just get rid of it. Everyone is different. Please be on your own journey. Everyone's going to start somewhere. I don't have enough room at home to do yoga and have to pay to go to a studio because of that. You need as much room as your physical body takes up. If you want to do lying down poses, then you need as much room as you are tall. So you don't need a lot of space. You don't have to go to a studio. If you're anything like me and a little bit of an introvert, I would have rather not gone to a studio when I started because I needed to be a little bit more comfortable in my own skin, and that's fine. Whatever your reason is to not go to a studio, whether it's finances or whether it's just not wanting to be around other people or whether the place is too far or you don't have access to it or whatever, you don't need a studio to start with yoga. Reach out to an instructor and ask them questions if you need to, or just start looking at very instructional videos online. I would very much research whoever is teaching, and anybody that has more detailed examples of how the muscles are moving or why you're breathing in a certain way probably has some kind of deep knowledge and deep experience and good schooling, probably. We're getting to the end, you guys. So, yoga can be taught by anybody. So if you have a very large ego about yourself, and don't get me wrong, we all have an ego, and we all express it. No matter how Zen or Buddhist you are, it's there. It comes out from time to time, or maybe you haven't been able to get rid of it and you don't know how to control it and make it work for you and other people. And that would be an example of somebody that's not quite in a space or position to teach yoga. Yes, of course you're going to have bad days. I have had bad days. I entirely understand that. So my core of what I'm trying to say is that not everybody can teach yoga. Not everybody has the knowledge of how muscles move and how they work to be able to safely get you into positions that may be more challenging. Not everybody has the background about how the structure could be improvised or could be better improved. Not everybody knows that if it's painful, you don't do it. That's a surprising one. It's true. It does not mean that these people can't grow into that. I'm not saying that forever an individual would never be able to teach yoga. What I'm saying is that some people have not yet designed themselves to safely and educated, and in an educated way, teach anyone. So that's all on Pep Talks Yoga. My yokados, I love you dearly. We've covered a myriad of myths today and debunked quite a few things. If you want to reach out to me and message me, please do. I'm so curious to hear what you have to say. I'm sure that some questions came up. Please like or subscribe or follow whatever platform you're using to hear more Pep Talks. I am super excited about our next episode, which is all about the why people either want to be in yoga or do deep down inside have the reason to be in yoga. And I hope that you have a lovely day. Namaste.